To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Robert Hayes stood in his mahogany-paneled office, watching the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 42, he had built Hayes Construction from a single truck operation into the Pacific Northwest's premier luxury home builder. His calloused hands, a reminder of his blue-collar beginnings, now signed million-dollar contracts instead of swinging hammers. Rob's story began in the trailer parks of Spokane, where his alcoholic father abandoned the family when Rob was 12. His mother, Linda, worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Rob learned early that survival meant self-reliance, and that betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. By 16, he was working construction after school, saving every penny for a future that seemed impossible. Family is everything, his mother had whispered on her deathbed when Rob was 25. But choose wisely who you call family, son. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Those words echoed as Rob built his empire, carefully selecting employees who shared his work ethic and integrity. When he met Diana Carlisle at a charity gala 7 years ago, her ethereal beauty and seemingly gentle nature captivated him. She was everything he wasn't: refined, educated at private schools, born into comfort. Her father owned a chain of upscale restaurants across Washington state. Diana possessed an almost supernatural ability to read people, to say exactly what they needed to hear. She made Rob believe he was worthy of love despite his rough edges. Their wedding was a fairy tale affair that made the society pages, with Diana radiant in her grandmother's vintage gown. For the first 3 years, Rob thought he'd found his anchor. Diana supported his business ventures, hosted elegant dinner parties that impressed clients, and seemed genuinely invested in their future. She had a particular talent for making people feel special, remembered everyone's names and personal details, and could charm anyone within minutes of meeting them. But perfection, Rob learned, was often a carefully constructed mask. The cracks began showing in year 4. Diana grew restless, complaining about Rob's long hours and demanding more attention. She started taking art classes 3 evenings a week, though Rob never saw any artwork. When he suggested joining her at exhibitions, she claimed the instructor preferred students to find their own voice, without outside influence. "You wouldn't understand the creative process, Rob," she'd say with a dismissive laugh that cut deeper each time. "Your world is all concrete and blueprints. Mine requires sensitivity." Rob's business partner and closest friend, Miguel Santos, had warned him from the beginning. Miguel, a former Navy SEAL turned contractor, possessed an uncanny ability to read people's true intentions. He'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan before joining Rob's company as head of security and operations. "She's performing, hermano," Miguel had said after their first double date. "Everything about her feels rehearsed. Watch her eyes when she thinks no one's looking." Rob had dismissed the concern as jealousy. Miguel's own marriage had ended badly when his wife left him for a doctor while he was deployed. But Miguel's instincts, honed by years in combat zones, rarely failed him. Now, standing in his office, Rob reflected on the mounting evidence he'd been ignoring. The late-night phone calls Diana claimed were from her sister in Portland. The new lingerie he'd found still tagged in her drawer. The way she'd started scheduling her hair appointments on the same days as her art classes. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Coffee tomorrow? Need to discuss the Bellevue project." Rob knew Miguel well enough to recognize code. The Bellevue project had been completed months ago. Something was wrong, and Miguel had information. That evening, Rob arrived home to find Diana in their marble-appointed kitchen, humming while preparing dinner. She wore a silk blouse he'd never seen before, her auburn hair styled in an elaborate updo more suited for a date than a quiet evening at home. "You're glowing," Rob observed, studying her face for any telltale signs. Diana smiled, the expression not quite reaching her green eyes. "Just happy, darling. The art classes have been so fulfilling. I'm finally discovering who I really am." "And who is that?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Diana's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. "Someone who deserves more than this," she said softly, gesturing around their custom-built home worth $3 million. "Someone who needs passion, not just security." Rob felt something cold settle in his chest, not heartbreak, but recognition. He'd heard those words before, in his mother's voice when she'd explained why his father left. The pattern was repeating, but this time, Rob wasn't a helpless child. "I see," he said quietly. "And have you found this passion elsewhere?" Diana's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "What kind of question is that? I would never." "Of course not," Rob interrupted, his voice steady. "My mistake." But it wasn't a mistake, and they both knew it. As Diana turned back to her cooking, Rob made a mental note of every detail. The new perfume, the way she kept checking her phone, the elaborate dinner she was preparing on a Tuesday night. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "She's not at art class. A friend." Rob deleted the message and smiled for the first time in weeks. The game had begun. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Miguel's weathered face was grim as he slid a manila envelope across the coffee shop table. His dark eyes, which had seen too much in both war and peace, held a mixture of anger and sympathy. "I didn't want to be right about this one, Rob," Miguel said quietly. "But you needed to know." Rob opened the envelope with steady hands, though his jaw clenched as he examined the photographs inside. Diana, radiant and laughing, her arms wrapped around a man Rob didn't recognize. The images showed them at restaurants, entering a downtown hotel, sharing intimate moments that spoke of a relationship far beyond casual acquaintance. Trevor Walsh. Miguel continued, consulting his notes. 38, owns 3 fitness studios in the city. Divorced 2 years ago, has a reputation as a serial cheater. His ex-wife took him for everything in the divorce after catching him with multiple women. Rob studied Trevor's face in the photos, classically handsome with artificially whitened teeth and the kind of tan that came from expensive vacations. He exuded the superficial charm that Rob had learned to distrust in both business and life. "How long?" Rob asked. "Best I can tell, about 8 months. Maybe longer. They're not careful, been seen all over town. I'm surprised no one told you sooner." "People don't want to be the messenger," Rob said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Continue." Miguel flipped through more papers. Trevor's fitness empire is built on debt and promises. He's leveraged to the eyeballs, behind on rent for 2 of his locations. His clientele is mostly wealthy housewives looking for attention and validation. Classic predator pattern. Rob absorbed this information with the same methodical approach he used for construction projects. Every detail mattered. Every weakness could be exploited. "There's more," Miguel said hesitantly. "Your anniversary party next week? The one Diana's family is hosting? Trevor's been invited as Diana's fitness trainer. She convinced her parents that you're too busy with work to care about her health and wellness." The betrayal cut deeper than Rob had expected. Not just the affair, but the calculated way Diana had woven Trevor into their social circle, making Rob look like the neglectful husband while she played the misunderstood wife. "She's been telling people you're abusive," Miguel continued, his voice carefully controlled. "Not physically, but emotionally. Says you ignore her, belittle her interests, treat her like a trophy wife. It's sophisticated manipulation, building a narrative that justifies her actions." Rob felt the familiar ice in his veins that had carried him through every crisis in his life. When his father left, when his mother died, when his first business partner tried to steal his company, this same cold clarity always emerged. "Miguel," Rob said quietly, "I need you to do something for me. Anything, hermano. I want you to find out everything about Trevor Walsh. Not just his finances. I want to know his weaknesses, his fears, his secrets. Everyone has something they're desperate to hide." Miguel nodded, understanding the assignment without explanation. They'd known each other long enough that words weren't always necessary. "What about Diana?" Rob was quiet for a long moment, watching the Seattle rain streak down the coffee shop window. "She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences." Over the next 5 days, Rob maintained his routine while quietly gathering intelligence. He attended business meetings, reviewed contracts, and played the role of the unsuspecting husband. But every evening, he studied Miguel's reports like battle plans. Trevor Walsh, it turned out, had a particular weakness for gambling. Not the casual type who enjoyed an occasional trip to the casino, but the desperate, addictive kind that destroyed lives. He owed substantial money to some very unforgiving people, loan sharks who didn't accept excuses or payment plans. Diana, meanwhile, had been busier than Rob imagined. She'd been systematically poisoning their social circle against him, spreading rumors about his temper, his controlling nature, his lack of emotional availability. She'd painted herself as the victim of a loveless marriage to a cold, ambitious man who cared more about money than his wife. The most damaging revelation came on Thursday. Miguel discovered that Diana had been to a divorce attorney, not to file papers, but to explore her options. She wanted to know how much she could claim in a no-fault divorce, whether she could get spousal support, what assets she might be entitled to split. She's planning to leave you after the anniversary party, Miguel reported. Probably wants to make a statement, humiliate you in front of your friends and her family. Maximum emotional damage. Rob absorbed this information without flinching. Perfect. Perfect. Miguel looked confused. It gives us time to prepare. And it means she's underestimated me completely. That night, Rob sat in his home office, surrounded by financial documents and legal papers. Diana was downstairs, presumably texting with Trevor while watching television. The house felt like a theater set, beautiful but hollow, filled with performed emotions and scripted conversations. Rob opened his laptop and began typing. If Diana wanted to play games, he'd show her what a real strategist could accomplish. But first, he needed to make some calls to old friends, people who owed him favors, people who understood that loyalty was earned and betrayal was punished. The anniversary party was 6 days away. Diana thought it would be her moment of triumph, the perfect stage for her grand finale. Instead, it would be the beginning of her education and consequences. Rob smiled as he worked, remembering his mother's words about choosing family carefully. Diana had taught him the most valuable lesson of all. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford, but vengeance was a craft he was eager to master. Chapter 3: The Web Titans. Rob's phone rang at 6 a.m. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in 15 years, Danny Morrison, his old crew chief from his early construction days. Danny now ran a private investigation firm specializing in sensitive matters for Seattle's elite. Bobby Hayes, Danny's gravelly voice carried the weight of shared history. Heard you might need some professional assistance. Miguel had reached out to their network. In construction, information flowed like concrete, slowly but inexorably, reaching every corner. Danny's reputation was built on discretion and results. I need a comprehensive profile, Rob said without preamble. Trevor Walsh and his associates. Financial, personal, professional. Everything. Already started, kid. Your partner filled me in. I'll have preliminary findings by tonight. Danny had learned his trade in Army intelligence before transitioning to civilian work. His methods were thorough and occasionally bent legal boundaries, but his results were unquestionable. That evening, Rob reviewed Danny's initial report in his locked home office. The picture it painted was more damaging than he'd hoped. Trevor Walsh had built his fitness empire on a foundation of lies and exploitation. His business model specifically targeted unhappy wives, identifying vulnerability and exploiting it for both financial and personal gain. Diana wasn't his first mark. She was simply the most profitable. He's run this con at least 6 times, Danny's report detailed. Targets wealthy married women, seduces them, then either blackmails them for money or gets them to invest in his businesses. His ex-wife wasn't his victim. She was his partner until she found a better target. The most interesting detail involved Trevor's current financial crisis. He owed $200,000 to Sal Torino, a loan shark known for collecting debts with interest that extended beyond money. Torino's reputation included broken bones and permanent relocations for those who disappointed him. Rob's phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. He looked at his watch, 7:30 p.m. According to Miguel's surveillance, Trevor's gym closed at 8 p.m. on weekdays. They weren't being subtle anymore. Rob made 3 phone calls that evening. The first was to David Chun, his attorney, requesting an emergency meeting to discuss asset protection strategies. The second was to his accountant, asking for a complete review of their joint finances. The third call was to a number Danny had provided, someone who could solve problems that lawyers and accountants couldn't touch. Friday morning brought unexpected visitors to Rob's office. Sal Torino arrived with 2 associates, their presence filling the space with unspoken menace. Sal was a compact man in his 60s, impeccably dressed, but carrying the aura of someone accustomed to violence. Mr. Hayes, Sal's voice was cultured, betraying an expensive education. I understand we have a mutual interest in Mr. Trevor Walsh. Rob gestured to the chairs across from his desk. I appreciate you coming personally, Mr. Torino. Your reputation precedes you. A man who honors his debts, builds with integrity. I respect that. Sal settled into his chair, his associates remaining standing. Trevor Walsh, however, lacks these qualities. I'm listening. He owes me a substantial sum. More troubling, he's been making promises about upcoming funds, specifically, money he expects to receive from a wealthy woman he's been courting. Your wife, I believe. Rob kept his expression neutral. And I don't typically involve myself in marital disputes, but Mr. Walsh has made my business his business by using your wife's name as collateral for his debts. This creates complications. What kind of complications? Sal smiled, the expression lacking warmth. The kind that require creative solutions. I propose a partnership. You help me collect what I'm owed, and I ensure that Mr. Walsh learns the importance of choosing his romantic partners more carefully. Rob considered the offer. Partnering with Sal Torino wasn't a decision to make lightly, but Trevor had already involved dangerous people in Rob's life through his connection to Diana. What did you have in mind? Nothing that would implicate you directly. Mr. Walsh believes he's about to receive a windfall from your divorce settlement. When that fails to materialize, he'll need to find alternative ways to honor his commitments. I simply want to be present for those negotiations. Rob understood the subtext. Trevor would be dealt with, but in a way that couldn't be traced back to Rob. It was elegant and effective. And Diana? Your wife made her choices, Mr. Hayes. I don't punish people for stupidity, only for interfering with my business. As long as she stays out of my way, she'll face consequences of your choosing, not mine. They shook hands, sealing an arrangement that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. But betrayal had a way of expanding one's moral flexibility. Saturday brought the final pieces of Rob's plan into focus. Danny delivered a complete dossier on Diana's activities, including detailed records of her lies to friends and family. More importantly, he discovered that Diana had been secretly photographing Rob's business documents, apparently feeding information to Trevor about potential financial opportunities. She's been setting you up for more than just a divorce, Danny explained. They were planning to use inside information about your projects to compete against you. Trevor was going to start a construction company using your business strategies and client lists. The betrayal was more comprehensive than Rob had imagined. Diana hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been conducting industrial espionage, planning to destroy his business while stealing his life's work. That afternoon, Rob made his final preparations. He transferred specific assets to accounts Diana couldn't access, restructured his business partnerships to protect against future legal challenges, and arranged for certain documents to be delivered at precisely the right moment. Miguel joined him for dinner Saturday night, the two men sharing a quiet meal, while Diana attended what she claimed was a girls' night out, but was actually an overnight stay with Trevor at the Four Seasons. You ready for tomorrow? Miguel asked. Rob looked around the house he'd built for Diana, filled with art she'd chosen and memories that now felt hollow. I've been ready since the day I met her, he said quietly. I just didn't know what I was preparing for. The anniversary party was 18 hours away. Diana thought she was walking into her moment of triumph. Instead, she was about to discover that underestimating Robert Hayes was the most expensive mistake she'd ever made. Chapter 4. The Anniversary Trap. The Carlisle family estate sprawled across 10 acres of manicured lawns overlooking Puget Sound. Diana's parents, Robert and Patricia Carlisle, had spared no expense for their daughter's anniversary celebration. White tents dotted the grounds, crystal chandeliers hung from temporary pavilions, and a string quartet played softly near the rose garden. Rob arrived alone, explaining to the concerned host that Diana was running late due to a last-minute hair appointment. In reality, she was still at the Four Seasons with Trevor, unaware that her carefully orchestrated timeline was about to collapse. Robert, you look wonderful. Patricia Carlisle embraced him warmly. Diana's mother had always treated Rob with genuine affection, making tonight's events more painful for everyone involved. The guest list represented Seattle's social elite, business leaders, politicians, and old money families who valued reputation above all else. Diana had specifically invited these people to witness what she thought would be Rob's public humiliation. Miguel circulated through the crowd, dressed in an expensive suit that concealed his tactical background. Danny Morrison worked the perimeter, coordinating with security personnel who owed favors to Rob's company. Every element was in place. At 7 o'clock, Diana arrived in a stunning red dress that accentuated her auburn hair and emerald eyes. She moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, accepting compliments and sympathy for her difficult marriage with practiced grace. "Darling," she kissed Rob's cheek with theatrical affection. "I'm so sorry I'm late. You know how these things are." Rob smiled, noting the subtle scent of Trevor's cologne on her skin. "Of course. You look beautiful." Diana's confidence was intoxicating to watch. She believed she was untouchable, protected by her family's wealth and social standing. The revelation would be that much more devastating. Trevor arrived at 7:30, playing his role as Diana's fitness trainer with amusing conviction. He wore an expensive suit that someone else had clearly chosen, his muscled frame and artificial smile making him look like an actor playing a businessman rather than the real thing. "Robert," Trevor extended his hand with practiced sincerity. "So great to finally meet you. Diana's told me so much about you." "I'm sure she has," Rob replied, his grip deliberately firm. "And she's told me about her training sessions with you." Trevor's smile flickered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "She's very dedicated to her fitness goals." "Oh, I know exactly how dedicated she is." The conversation was interrupted by Patricia Carlisle calling for attention. The formal toasts were about to begin, with Diana's father speaking first about the importance of marriage and commitment. The irony was lost on no one except the guilty parties. As the evening progressed, Rob played his part perfectly, the devoted husband celebrating 7 years of marriage. But those who knew him well could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked Diana's every movement. At 9 o'clock, Miguel gave Rob a subtle nod. Phase 1 was complete. Trevor's phone buzzed with an urgent text. "Sal Torino is looking for you. Says you missed another payment." He's not happy. The message came from an untraceable number that Danny had arranged. Trevor's face went pale as he read the text. He excused himself from his conversation with Diana's cousins and stepped outside to make a call. But Sal Torino wasn't answering his phone because he was busy with other arrangements. Meanwhile, Danny had positioned himself near Diana's table, close enough to overhear her conversation with her sisters. She was describing her plans for finally being free and how she'd found someone who truly understands her needs. "The thing is," Diana said quietly, "Robert's been so focused on work that he doesn't even notice I'm gone. It'll be such a shock when I tell him I want a divorce." Her sisters exchanged uncomfortable glances. They'd grown up with Diana, knew her capacity for manipulation, but even they seemed disturbed by her callousness. At 9:30, Rob stood and approached the microphone. The crowd quieted, expecting the traditional anniversary speech expressing gratitude and love. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Rob began, his voice carrying clearly across the grounds. 7 years ago, Diana and I made promises to each other. Promises about love, faithfulness, and building a life together. Diana beamed from her table, clearly expecting a romantic tribute that would make her impending betrayal even more dramatic. "Tonight, I want to honor those promises," Rob continued, "especially the ones about faithfulness and honesty." The crowd murmured approvingly, but Diana's smile faltered slightly. Something in Rob's tone wasn't quite right. "Marriage teaches you many things," Rob said, his eyes finding Diana's across the crowd. "It teaches you about trust, about partnership, and about the difference between the person you married and the person you thought you married." Diana's face was beginning to flush, recognizing that this speech was veering from the script she'd imagined. "So tonight, I want to give my wife something special. Something that represents exactly what our marriage has become." Rob reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila envelope, identical to the one Miguel had shown him in the coffee shop. "For you, my dear," he said, walking to Diana's table as the crowd watched in confusion. "Happy anniversary." He placed the envelope in front of her and then turned to address the crowd one final time. "I hope you'll all excuse me for leaving early. I have somewhere else to be, specifically in my new sports car that Diana doesn't know about. It's amazing what you can accomplish when your spouse thinks you're too busy to pay attention." The implications of his words sent ripples of shock through the crowd. Diana's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and dawning terror. Rob walked calmly toward the exit, nodding politely to guests who were too stunned to react. Behind him, he heard the sound of paper tearing as Diana opened the envelope. And then, piercing the elegant evening air, came the scream that would haunt Diana Carlisle for the rest of her life. Chapter 5: The Unraveling. Diana's scream shattered the genteel atmosphere like a gunshot. The photographs scattered across the white tablecloth in full view of her family and friends. Images of her and Trevor in passionate embraces, entering hotels, sharing intimate dinners that clearly weren't fitness consultations. But the photographs were only the beginning. Mixed among the images were bank statements showing Trevor's gambling debts, court documents from his previous divorces, and a detailed report of his history targeting wealthy women. The final page was a letter in Diana's own handwriting to her divorce attorney, discussing how to maximize my settlement while minimizing Robert's ability to protect his assets. Patricia Carlisle reached for the photographs with shaking hands, her face draining of color as she recognized her daughter's betrayal. "Diana, what is this?" Diana tried to gather the scattered evidence, but her sisters had already seen enough. The entire table was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. "It's not what it looks like," Diana stammered, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Trevor, meanwhile, had disappeared entirely. The text about Sal Torino had sent him fleeing into the night, leaving Diana to face the consequences alone. Robert Carlisle Sr. stood slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. A man who had built his reputation on integrity and family values. He was watching his daughter destroy everything he'd worked to create. "Get out," he said quietly. "Daddy, please. Get out of my house. Now." The command carried absolute authority. Diana looked around the table desperately, seeking support from her sisters or mother, but found only contempt and embarrassment. As Diana fled toward the parking lot, her red dress trailing behind her like a wound, the guests began to murmur among themselves. The story would be all over Seattle's social circles by morning. Meanwhile, Rob was driving his new Porsche 911 Turbo through the winding roads above the city, his phone connected to Miguel's voice through the car's speakers. "Trevor's in the wind," Miguel reported. "But he can't run far. Danny's got people watching his apartment, his gyms, even his mother's house in Tacoma. And Sal, waiting. He's actually impressed with how cleanly you handled the exposure. Says it shows professional respect for the process." Rob smiled grimly as he navigated a sharp curve. What about Diana? Heading home in her car. Crying. Her phone's been ringing nonstop, probably reporters. This story's going to be everywhere by tomorrow. The destruction was proceeding exactly as planned, but Rob felt no satisfaction. Only the cold completion of necessary tasks. Rob's phone rang as he pulled into his driveway. Diana's name appeared on the screen. "Where are you?" Her voice was raw from crying and screaming. "Home. Where else would I be? You humiliated me in front of everyone. My family, my friends. I showed them who you really are. There's a difference. Robert, please. We can work this out. Trevor means nothing to me. It was just a mistake." Rob's voice was ice. "For 8 months? Planning to steal my business secrets was also a mistake? Talking to divorce attorneys was a mistake?" The silence on the other end told him she hadn't expected him to know about her more elaborate betrayals. "How did you know about everything?" "Diana, I built a multi-million-dollar business by paying attention to details. Did you really think I wouldn't notice my wife conducting espionage in my own home? I never. You photographed my business documents. You fed information to Trevor about my projects. You weren't just cheating on me, you were planning to destroy me." Diana's sobs echoed through the phone. "I love you, Robert. I made mistakes, but I love you." "No," Rob said quietly. "You love what I represent. Security, status, money. You never loved me." "That's not true. Then why did you tell everyone I was abusive? Why did you spread lies about me being controlling and emotionally unavailable? Why did you paint yourself as the victim of a terrible marriage while planning to take everything I've worked for?" Each question landed like a physical blow. Diana had no answers because there were no good answers. "I want you out of the house by tomorrow night," Rob continued. "Take your clothes and personal items. Everything else stays. You can't throw me out. This is my home too. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only, purchased before our marriage with money I earned. Check the deed if you don't believe me. Rob hung up without waiting for a response. Through the window, he could see Diana's car pulling into the driveway, her headlights cutting through the darkness like accusations. Inside the house, Diana's phone was buzzing constantly. Text messages from friends and family, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, probably reporters who'd gotten wind of the story. She found Rob in his study, calmly reviewing documents at his desk. "We need to talk," she said, her makeup smeared and her expensive dress wrinkled. "No, we don't. Robert, I know you're hurt." "Hurt?" Rob looked up from his papers. "Diana, I'm not hurt. I'm disappointed. There's a difference." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm disappointed in myself for believing your performance for so long, for thinking that someone capable of your level of deception might actually be capable of love." Diana moved closer to his desk, her voice taking on the pleading tone that had once been so effective. "Baby, please. I know I made mistakes. Huge mistakes. But we can get through this. Marriage counseling, therapy, whatever you want. I'll do anything." Rob set down his pen and looked at her directly. "There's nothing you can do. You crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. Everyone makes mistakes. Not like this. Not this calculated. Not this comprehensive." Diana sank into the chair across from his desk, her composure finally cracking completely. "What do you want from me? An apology? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't want anything from you, Diana. That's the point. You have nothing left to offer me." The finality in his voice seemed to penetrate her desperation. For the first time, she appeared to understand that her marriage was genuinely over. "What happens now?" "Now you learn to live with the consequences of your choices. Starting tomorrow." As if summoned by his words, Diana's phone rang. The caller ID showed her father's number. She looked at Rob pleadingly, but he simply returned to his documents. Diana answered the call with trembling hands, and even from across the room, Rob could hear her father's voice, cold and implacable, explaining that she was no longer welcome at family gatherings until she figured out how to behave like an adult. The dismantling of Diana's life was proceeding faster than even Rob had anticipated. By tomorrow, she would be truly alone, stripped of family support, social standing, and financial security. But Rob knew the real punishment was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Hunt Begins. Trevor Walsh crouched in the back seat of a taxi at 3 a.m., his expensive suit rumpled and his confidence completely shattered. The driver, a Middle Eastern immigrant named Hassan, kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. "You sure you want to go to this neighborhood, man? It's not safe for someone like you." Trevor clutched his phone, which had been buzzing with increasingly threatening messages from numbers he didn't recognize. The last one had included a photo of his mother's house with the message, "Lovely garden. Would hate to see something happen to it. Just drive," Trevor muttered, slumping lower in the seat. He'd fled the anniversary party the moment he received the text about Sal Torino, but running was proving futile. These people had resources and connections that stretched throughout the city. The taxi pulled up to a cheap motel in South Seattle, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about identification. Trevor paid the driver with cash and hurried inside, his head down and shoulders hunched. Meanwhile, Diana sat alone in her BMW in the driveway of what had been her home for 5 years. Rob had turned off all the lights inside, sending a clear message that she wasn't welcome. Her phone had finally stopped ringing, but only because she'd turned it off entirely. The magnitude of her situation was beginning to penetrate the shock. Her family had disowned her, her friends were avoiding her calls, and her husband, the man she'd thought was too boring and predictable to pose any real threat, had orchestrated her complete social destruction with surgical precision. She tried calling Trevor, but his phone went straight to voicemail. The coward had abandoned her the moment things got difficult, just like every other man in her life except Rob. The irony wasn't lost on her. At dawn, Diana drove to her sister Michelle's house in Bellevue, hoping for sympathy or at least temporary shelter. Michelle met her at the door still in her bathrobe, her face hard with disgust. "I can't believe you," Michelle said without preamble. "Dad had a hard episode last night because of you. He's in the hospital." Diana's face went white. "Is he okay?" "He's stable. No thanks to you." Michelle stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "Mom's with him. She asked me to tell you not to come to the hospital." "Michelle, please. I need help." I need somewhere to stay. You need to take responsibility for what you've done. To Dad, to Mom, to Robert. Especially to Robert. Robert's not innocent in this. Michelle's laugh was bitter. Really? What did he do? Work too hard to give you everything you wanted? Failed to notice that his wife was a selfish, manipulative adulteress. The words hit Diana like physical blows. To hear them from her own sister, someone who had once been her closest confidant, was devastating. I made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, Diana. You made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices to betray someone who loved you. Michelle went back inside, leaving Diana standing alone on the doorstep like a door-to-door salesman peddling something no one wanted. Back at the motel, Trevor was discovering that his problems extended far beyond social embarrassment. Room service knocked on his door at 9 a.m., not to deliver food, but to inform him that his credit cards had been declined and he needed to pay cash for another night. That's impossible, Trevor protested. I have excellent credit. But when he called his bank, he learned that his accounts had been frozen pending an investigation into irregular financial activities. Someone with serious resources was systematically dismantling his life. His phone rang with a call from his business manager, Stephanie. Trevor, we have a problem. The landlord for the Ballard location is demanding immediate payment of back rent, and the insurance company is asking questions about your recent claims. Also, there are men here asking about you. Scary-looking men. Trevor's hands began to shake. What kind of men? The kind who don't smile when they talk. They left a message. Tell Mr. Walsh that Mr. Torino would like to schedule a meeting to discuss his payment plan. The line went dead. Stephanie had hung up, probably deciding that her own safety was more important than her loyalty to her employer. Trevor tried calling Diana, but her phone was turned off. He tried calling his ex-wife, but she laughed and hung up when she recognized his voice. He tried calling his lawyer, but was told that his retainer had been insufficient and further services would require immediate payment. By noon, Trevor was truly alone and completely trapped. Rob, meanwhile, was in his office reviewing reports from his various allies. Danny Morrison's network had proven remarkably efficient at identifying and exploiting Trevor's vulnerabilities. His finances are completely frozen, Danny reported. His business partners are distancing themselves, his employees are quitting, and his gym memberships are being canceled en masse. How? Rob asked. Word travels fast in this town. When people heard about last night, they started connecting dots. Turns out Trevor's been running variations of this scam for years. Women are coming forward, sharing stories about his manipulation and financial exploitation. Miguel added his own update. Diana's staying at the Four Seasons downtown. Charged it to a credit card that'll probably be declined tomorrow. She's making calls trying to find allies, but everyone's cutting her loose. And Sal, waiting for your signal. He's actually enjoying this. Says it's like watching a chess match where he gets to be the winning piece. Rob nodded slowly. The first phase had been about exposure and isolation. Phase 2 would be about consequences and justice. Set up the meeting with Sal for tonight. And Danny, I need you to arrange something else. What? Trevor's mother in Tacoma. I want her to receive some visitors. Not threatening ones, concerned ones. People who want to help her understand what kind of man her son really is. Danny smiled grimly. Consider it done. As the sun set over Seattle, both Trevor and Diana were learning that betraying Robert Hayes carried consequences that extended far beyond the end of a marriage. They had awakened something in him that they were completely unprepared to face. The real punishment was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The abandoned warehouse in Georgetown sat beneath the industrial glow of Seattle's shipping district. Rob arrived at midnight in his Porsche, the engine's purr echoing off empty buildings. Miguel waited in the shadows, his military bearing evident even in casual clothes. He's inside, Miguel said quietly. Sal's people found him at his mother's house. Apparently, he thought hiding behind a 70-year-old woman would protect him. Rob felt a flicker of disgust. Any problems? None. His mother was actually relieved when Danny's people explained what her son had been doing. She gave Trevor up willingly, said she'd been wondering where his money was coming from. They walked through the entrance together, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Sal Torino waited in the center of the warehouse, flanked by two associates. Trevor sat on a metal chair, his wrists zip-tied behind his back, his face swollen from what appeared to be a recent education in respect. Mr. Hayes, Sal nodded approvingly. Punctual. I appreciate that. Trevor looked up at Rob with eyes that held a mixture of terror and desperate pleading. Robert, thank God you're here. These men are crazy. They've made some kind of mistake. The only mistake, Rob said quietly, was thinking you could steal from me without consequences. I never stole anything. You stole my wife's affections through manipulation and lies. You stole proprietary information about my business. You stole my reputation by encouraging Diana to spread rumors about my character. Rob circled the chair slowly. But most importantly, you stole my time. 7 years I invested in a marriage while you and Diana plotted against me. Sal interjected smoothly. Mr. Walsh also stole $200,000 from me, promising repayment with funds he expected to receive from your divorce settlement. When I explained this was unacceptable, he became quite rude. Trevor's face was pale with sweat despite the warehouse's chill. I can get your money. Both of you. I just need time. Time, Rob mused. An interesting concept. You had time to seduce my wife. Time to plan the destruction of my business. Time to spread lies about my character. But now, when consequences arrive, suddenly time is in short supply. Rob gestured to Miguel, who stepped forward with a leather briefcase. Inside were documents that Trevor recognized with growing horror. Copies of his financial records, business contracts, and personal correspondence. Your gambling debts extend beyond Mr. Torino, Rob explained. Casinos in Vegas, private games in Vancouver, online betting accounts. Total exposure, approximately $850,000. Your gyms are mortgaged beyond their value. Your personal assets are non-existent, and your reputation is destroyed. But here's what's interesting, Miguel added, consulting a tablet. Your insurance policies are still active. Life insurance, disability insurance, business insurance. Substantial payouts if something unfortunate were to happen. Trevor's breathing became rapid and shallow. You can't be serious. This is about a divorce. People get divorced all the time. This isn't about a divorce, Rob said coldly. This is about justice. You targeted my wife specifically because of her wealth and vulnerability. You plan to destroy my business and steal my life's work. That makes you more than an adulterer. It makes you a parasite. Sal checked his watch impatiently. Gentlemen, while this is enlightening, I have other appointments tonight. Rob nodded. Of course. Trevor, you have a choice to make. Option 1. You can try to run again. Mr. Torino's associates will find you eventually, and the conversation will be considerably less civilized. Option 2. Trevor whispered. You disappear. Voluntarily. Tonight. Forever. Your insurance companies receive documentation of your accidental death during a hiking trip in the North Cascades. Your mother receives a substantial life insurance payout that will ensure her comfortable retirement. Your debts are forgiven because dead men can't pay them. Trevor stared at Rob in disbelief. You're talking about murdering me. I'm talking about giving you the opportunity to do something honorable for the first time in your adult life, Rob corrected. Your mother will be financially secure. Your creditors will be satisfied. Your victims will have closure. And if I refuse, Miguel answered, then you'll spend whatever time you have left looking over your shoulder, wondering when Mr. Torino's patience will finally run out. Your mother will lose her house to pay your debts. The women you victimized will never see justice. Sal added his own perspective. In my experience, men who steal from both their creditors and their friends rarely live long, comfortable lives. The mountains of Washington state contain many unfortunate hiking accidents. Trevor looked around the warehouse desperately, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. There has to be another way. There is, Rob said. You can confess everything to the police. Face trial for fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy. Spend 15 to 20 years in prison while your mother loses everything to civil lawsuits. The silence stretched for several minutes while Trevor contemplated his options. Finally, he looked up at Rob with something approaching respect. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment I confirmed your existence, Rob replied honestly. You made the mistake of thinking I was a passive victim. In construction, we call that a foundational error. Everything that follows is unstable. Trevor nodded slowly, appearing to reach some internal decision. What guarantee do I have that you'll honor the arrangement? You have my word, Rob said simply, which is worth considerably more than yours ever was. And Diana? Diana will face her own reckoning. But that's not your concern anymore. Miguel approached with a tablet and stylus. These are the documents you'll need to sign. Insurance forms, a letter explaining your planned hiking trip, and a confession detailing your activities with Diana and other victims. Trevor's hands shook as he read through the papers. This confession will destroy my reputation. Your reputation was destroyed the moment you targeted my wife, Rob said. This just makes it official. As Trevor signed each document, Rob felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. Justice wasn't always legal, but it was always necessary. Sal's associates cut Trevor's restraints and provided him with hiking gear and supplies. You have until dawn, Sal explained. A helicopter will take you to a remote area of the North Cascades. After that, you're on your own. Trevor stood on unsteady legs, looking at Rob one final time. What happens to Diana? Rob's smile was devoid of warmth. Diana's education is just beginning. As Trevor was led away, Rob turned to Sal. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. Likewise, your approach to problem solving is quite sophisticated. If you ever need assistance with future difficulties, please don't hesitate to call. Rob shook hands with the loan shark, sealing a partnership that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. But betrayal had a way of expanding one's network of allies. By dawn, Trevor Walsh would be officially missing, presumed dead in a hiking accident. His confession would be delivered to law enforcement and local media, ensuring that his victims received validation and closure. But Diana's punishment would be far more personal and infinitely more creative. Chapter 8. The Final Gambit. Diana sat in the Four Seasons Hotel bar at 2 p.m., nursing her third vodka tonic and staring at her silent phone. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer had run a front-page story about Trevor's disappearance, complete with excerpts from his confession detailing his systematic seduction and exploitation of wealthy women. The article painted Diana not as a victim, but as Trevor's most recent mark, a woman so desperate for attention that she'd fallen for an obvious con artist while betraying her husband. The narrative was devastating because it was largely true. Her credit card had been declined that morning when she tried to extend her hotel stay. Her calls to friends went unanswered. Her family's silence was deafening. Even her hairdresser had canceled her standing appointment, citing scheduling conflicts. The bartender, a young woman named Jessica, had been shooting sympathetic glances in Diana's direction all afternoon. Finally, she approached with genuine concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? You've been here for hours." Diana looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Have you ever made a mistake so big that it destroyed everything you cared about?" "I've made plenty of mistakes," Jessica replied gently. "But most mistakes can be fixed if you're willing to do the work. Not this one. This one destroyed my family, my marriage, my entire life." Jessica glanced around the nearly empty bar before sitting across from Diana. What happened? The whole story poured out. The affair, the lies, the plans to destroy Rob's business, the anniversary party disaster. Jessica listened without judgment, occasionally refilling Diana's glass with water instead of alcohol. "Sounds like you fell for a predator," Jessica said finally. "But that doesn't excuse what you did to your husband." "I know," Diana whispered. "I know I destroyed everything. But I don't know how to fix it." "Have you talked to him?" "Really talked. Not just apologized." Diana shook her head. "He won't see me. Won't take my calls. He's made it clear that our marriage is over." "Then maybe you need to focus on fixing yourself instead of fixing the marriage." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Danny Morrison, who approached Diana's table with the confidence of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. "Mrs. Hayes? I'm Danny Morrison. I work for your husband. He'd like to see you." Diana's heart leaped with desperate hope. "He does?" "Yes, ma'am. But not to reconcile. He has a proposition for you." An hour later, Diana found herself in Rob's office, facing the man she'd married 7 years ago across a conference table that felt like a courtroom. Rob looked different, harder, more focused, like he'd shed some essential part of himself and emerged as someone more dangerous. "You wanted to see me?" Diana's voice was small, uncertain. "I wanted to offer you a choice," Rob replied without preamble. "The same kind of choice I offered Trevor." Diana's blood chilled. What happened to Trevor? Trevor chose to disappear rather than face the consequences of his actions. His confession has been very enlightening, particularly the parts about his systematic targeting of vulnerable women and his plans to destroy my business using information you provided. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen, and now we need to decide what comes next. Rob slid a folder across the table. Inside were divorce papers, not the collaborative dissolution Diana had imagined, but a comprehensive document that would leave her with virtually nothing. These papers give you a clean break, Rob explained. You sign them, and you walk away with your car, your personal belongings, and enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from Seattle. Diana scanned the documents with growing horror. This gives me almost nothing. No alimony, no property settlement. You're not entitled to alimony when you committed adultery and conspiracy to defraud. You're not entitled to property you tried to steal. The settlement I'm offering is more generous than you deserve. What if I refuse? Rob's expression didn't change. Then we go to trial. Every detail of your affair becomes public record. Your collaboration with Trevor's business schemes gets scrutinized by both civil and criminal courts. Your family's reputation suffers permanent damage. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you the opportunity to salvage some dignity from this situation. But that offer expires when you leave this room. Diana stared at the papers, understanding that this was her final choice. Sign away her life in Seattle, or fight a battle she couldn't win while destroying what remained of her family's standing. Where would I go? Anywhere but here. I suggest somewhere without extradition treaties, in case additional evidence of your activities surfaces. The implications were clear. Rob knew more about her involvement with Trevor than he'd revealed, and he was prepared to use that information if necessary. Diana picked up the pen with trembling hands. You really hate me, don't you? No, Rob said quietly. I don't hate you. I just don't love you anymore. And I don't trust you. Those are two very different things. As Diana signed each page, she felt like she was erasing herself from existence. 7 years of marriage, reduced to legal documents and financial settlements. What happens now? She asked after signing the final page. Now you leave. Tonight. Miguel will escort you to collect your belongings from the house. A car will take you to the airport. Where you go from there is your choice. And that's it. After 7 years, you're just done with me? Rob looked at her for a long moment, and Diana thought she saw a flicker of the man she'd married. But when he spoke, his voice remained cold and final. You were done with me the day you decided I wasn't enough for you. I'm just making it official. Diana stood slowly, feeling older than her 34 years. For what it's worth, I really did love you. Once. I know, Rob said. That's what makes this so tragic. As Diana walked toward the door, she turned back one last time. Will you ever forgive me? Rob's answer followed her into the hallway. Forgiveness is for people who are sorry for what they did, not sorry they got caught. 3 hours later, Diana Hayes boarded a red-eye flight to Miami with 2 suitcases and a cashier's check for $50,000, enough to start over, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. She never saw Seattle again. Chapter 9. The New Foundation. 6 months after Diana's departure, Rob stood in the same office where everything had unraveled, but the space felt different now. Cleaner. The photographs of his marriage had been replaced with pictures of construction projects and the charitable foundation he'd established in his mother's memory. Miguel entered with their usual morning coffee, settling into the chair that had once held Trevor's trembling form. The Diana Hayes sighting in Costa Rica was confirmed, Miguel reported. She's working as a hostess at a resort in Guanacaste. Apparently, she's going by her maiden name and telling people she's divorced from an abusive husband. Rob nodded without emotion. Let her tell whatever story helps her sleep at night. Danny also confirmed that Trevor Walsh's body was never found. The official investigation concluded he died in a hiking accident, but some of the rangers think he might have staged his own death. Does it matter? Not really. His confession destroyed his reputation completely. 3 more women have come forward about his scams, and his mother used the insurance money to enter a very nice assisted living facility. Rob appreciated the poetic justice. Trevor's final act had been the only honorable thing he'd ever done, even if it was motivated by self-preservation rather than genuine remorse. Any word from the Carlisle family? Miguel's expression softened slightly. Robert Sr. made a full recovery from his heart episode. Patricia called last week to thank you for handling everything so discreetly. They're grateful the scandal didn't destroy their business relationships. They're good people who raised a defective daughter. That's not their fault. The intercom buzzed with Rob's secretary announcing his next appointment. Sandra Mitchell, the director of Seattle's largest women's shelter, was waiting to discuss the Hayes Foundation's latest initiative. Send her in, Rob said, straightening his tie. Sandra entered with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to fighting for resources and recognition. In her mid-40s with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen the worst of human nature and refused to be broken by it. Mr. Hayes, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Please, call me Rob. And thank you for agreeing to partner with the Foundation. They spent an hour discussing the new shelter facility that the Hayes Foundation would fund, a state-of-the-art facility designed specifically for women who had been victimized by financial predators and emotional manipulators. The irony wasn't lost on Rob that his own experience with betrayal was funding help for other victims. This is incredibly generous, Sandra said, reviewing the architectural plans. The psychological counseling facilities, the job training center, the secure housing. This will help hundreds of women rebuild their lives. Everyone deserves a second chance, Rob said quietly, but only if they're willing to learn from their mistakes. After Sandra left, Rob stood alone in his office, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city looked the same, but his relationship with it had fundamentally changed. He was no longer the trusting husband who built homes for a life he thought was real. He was someone harder, more calculating, but also more purposeful. His phone rang with a call from Danny Morrison. Thought you'd want to know, Danny said without preamble. Diana tried to contact your office this morning. Called 3 times, claiming it was an emergency. Did she say what kind of emergency? Money problems. Apparently, the resort fired her for stealing from guests. She's asking for help, claiming she's learned her lesson and wants to come home. Rob felt nothing at the news. No satisfaction, no sympathy, no anger. Diana had become a stranger to him, someone from a previous life that felt like a book he'd read once and forgotten. What did you tell her? That Robert Hayes died in a construction accident 6 months ago. Left everything to charity. Rob smiled for the first time in days. Poetic. I thought so. She hung up crying. That evening, Rob had dinner alone at the restaurant where he'd first met Diana 7 years ago. The maitre d' recognized him and offered condolences for his tragic loss, having read the carefully planted stories about his amicable divorce from his troubled wife who needed to find herself. As Rob ate, he reflected on the lessons he'd learned. Trust was indeed a luxury he could no longer afford, but that didn't mean life wasn't worth living. It just meant choosing more carefully who deserved access to his world. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Drinks tomorrow? Got some news about a new project. Rob typed back, sure, but nowhere they know our names. Some habits, once learned, were worth keeping. Outside the restaurant window, Seattle continued its eternal rhythm of rain and recovery, ambition and disappointment. People fell in love, made promises, broke hearts, started over. The cycle never ended, but individual stories could be concluded with something approaching justice. Rob paid his check and walked into the night. No longer the man who had built a house for a woman who never existed. He was someone new now, harder but wiser, scarred but functional, alone but not lonely. Behind him, the restaurant continued serving dinner to couples who believed their love was different, special, permanent. Some of them were right. Many of them were wrong. All of them would discover the truth eventually. Rob drove home to his empty house, which no longer felt like a mausoleum of betrayed dreams, but like a foundation for whatever came next. He'd learned the most important lesson of all. Some people were worth trusting, some people were worth loving, and some people were worth destroying. The trick was knowing which was which before it was too late. In the distance, thunder rolled across Puget Sound, promising another storm. But Rob had weathered worse than weather, and he was still standing. That was enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.